What's up, everyone? Welcome to another instant reaction thoughts on The Last of Us Season 2. Matt here with Down Once More, and this week we're going to be talking about Episode 5, Feel Her Love. If this is one of your first episodes joining us, welcome. What I'm going to do here, I'm not going to do a full recap breakdown of the episode. You just watched it. We're going to be talking spoilers about the episode, spoilers up to this point in the video game. So there are some differences. I'm going to call out some of those on here. It's by no means going to be comprehensive, but this is my gut reaction. Just finished watching the episode. I come down here, record my thoughts, put it out to you. So let us know in the comments what you thought of this episode and if you agree with some of my takes or not. At the end, I do usually tease and spoil a few things for the future of the game, so I'll make sure to put that in the time codes below and give a heads up before we get into that section. I don't want anything to be spoiled from the future. I want people to be able to experience this as it is. So before we get into this episode specifically, a few things I want to call out. One, they're only doing 7 episodes this season. I think on last week's recap I said that there were 8 episodes, so we're halfway done. Wrong. Only 7 episodes are slated, so that means next week's the penultimate episode already, which I kind of have some thoughts because they had reported there was going to be an episode like the Bill and Frank episode this season that was going to focus on Eugene, and based on the preview for next week's episode, it's not that one, so there's no way they would do that for the finale, so I'm wondering if wires got crossed, if they were being a little misleading, if that'll actually be something that takes place in season 3, or maybe we're going to get a surprise bonus episode. I don't know. Few other things. I've just kind of come to the realization and acceptance that these are 2 different versions of the character Ellie. If you played the video game and if you're online and you can weed out the toxic comments about Bella Ramsey's looks and how they don't fit what people's perception of what Ellie should be in the game is, you separate those that are just on visual and looks based. The Ellie in the show that we get is quite different from the video game Ellie. And I've kind of accepted that. The creators of the game are working very closely in the show. Neil Druckmann talks at the end of each episode. He's involved in the creative process. He wrote and directed next week's episode, the penultimate episode. So they're cool with this version of Ellie. This version of Ellie is a lot less serious, a lot more whimsical, and not quite... and doesn't seem as beaten down. Now, at the end of this episode, that comes out a little bit, but I've just had to kind of accept the fact that these are 2 different versions of the characters of Ellie. It's not going to be just like the video game. This is a different medium. They're telling a slightly different story. A lot of the same beats are the same, but some of the motivations, they're going to build bigger character arcs for certain characters, delve into their backstory, give them more of a voice. And they've decided the character of Ellie needs to be kind of tweaked a little bit to best fit the story that they're telling. So I'm trying to accept that, trust their vision, and we'll see how it goes. The other thing, Dina's hair, far too perfect in this. How does she still have like perfect waves and leaving her hair down when you're traveling in the apocalypse? You don't have showers. You don't have all this stuff. I know that hair that long in women's hair, you can't keep it clean. There's no way they're not throwing it in a ponytail. I know people are like, oh, in the game, they should have let them wear their hair down more. No, that was more realistic. Their hair is going to be dirty. It's going to be messy. They're going to just throw it in a ponytail. They're not going to keep it just waving, wafting around their shoulders. And especially last week's episode, at the end of it, when after they were going through the tunnels, Dina's hair was all wet and raggedy, and then she wakes up and her and Ellie get it on, and her hair's like still perfectly wavy when she wakes up in the morning. That's not how hair works. Not any of it. But let's get into this week's episode now. Those are my general notes and comments that I'd had as I was thinking and reflecting on things in the season so far. But this episode, episode 5, titled Feel Her Love, we open up on Hanrahan, who we were introduced to last week as kind of getting Isaac involved in the WLF movement, converting Isaac from Fedra in the flashback of Isaac scene. It didn't say there was a time jump or anything, so my kind of assumption, and almost what it seems like, is that this takes place in the present day. Hanrahan's still alive. They're talking about Isaac going investigating a potential breaking of the peace treaty, which we had Isaac doing an interrogation last week. So I don't know. I could go back and forth. Some of the dialogue almost could have been taken as it was in the past. Maybe it was in the present. I'm not sure. We're introduced to the character of Elise Park, and the idea of spores are finally in the HBO series. Elise Park her squad was in charge of securing the hospital. They secured all the main floors, went to the basement, where they said that the basement, some of those were where the first cordyceps patients were treated. They've been there since '03. And you find out her son was down there, and calls, says he can't breathe and says it's in the air, seal us in. And calls for her, Craig Mazin called it out at the end of the episode, that Elise Park, that she did what Joel couldn't do, and that was sacrifice her son. It was already too late for him, but sacrifice him for the better good of people, and sealed him off in that basement with the spores, with the cordyceps, to basically die. We see him later on just struggling, just being kept alive to breathe in air and breathe out spores. Leon, and that tough decision that she had to make. And so we get our first glimpse of the hospital, and we get our first introduction to spores in the game. There was a lot of discussion about it in season 1, the absence of spores. I kind of like that they waited to bring them in here now, and now it makes it into a lot bigger and scarier thing in a way. And so I do kind of like that call. And then after that, we get to Seattle Day 2. Nice title card. Ellie and Dina in the theater planning their next moves. And this is kind of where I said about the two different Ellies. Ellie, yeah, she was never shown to be a master tactician, but she was shown to be very skilled and smart in her approach. Sometimes, yeah, her impulsiveness would get ahead of her. But this, just Dina basically calling her dumb, saying that she never took to schooling, and Dina being shown as all of her triangulating the positions, which she does in the game. She's listening to the radio, plotting their positions, triangulating things. But this came across to me as Ellie just kind of dumb meathead, doesn't care, goes in blaming, guns blazing, not blaming, where the Ellie in the game was still kind of calculated and would plot things and be strategic when it suited her. And granted, that all kind of depends on how you're playing it as a player, right? But I don't know, that was one of the other things that just really differentiated this portrayal of Ellie for me. And Dina is shown. She's kind of been shown to be a jack of all trades and kind of knows everything and is just kind of brilliant in the show. We're getting a lot more Dina love in the TV series. But we also have a moment where Ellie finds a guitar, is on stage in the theater, and starts playing a song on the guitar. The If I Ever Were to Lose You, which I called out last week's episode is what was missing before Ellie played Take On Me. In the video game, it's Joel, spoiler alert, I guess, minor for the game. It's a song Joel wrote. And so Ellie starts playing it when she first picks up the guitar before Dina enters the music store in the games. And so you see in here, Ellie, after she plays that song, just kind of a resolve go on her face when Dina comes in and says she thinks she found a path. What comes next is them kind of going through WL Wolf territory and finding this building that they'd been avoiding. And we get to see the stalkers again. And the level of just kind of tenseness and dread that lay about as they were going through the hallway and talking about it being dead silent. And then when you see the stalkers and how the cordyceps have kind of grown on the stalkers' heads, almost kind of looks like a crown. I feel like that's what my mind goes to. And Ellie has called out that these are the smarter ones that she encountered earlier when she first gets bit in the season. They think there's just one. They make a plan to flank it, and then there's about 11 of them. That's the number Craig Mazin said at the end, so we're going to go with it. And they come up with a plan. Ellie's like, hey, I can't get infected. You go close yourself off there. I'll fight off as many as I can. Which is, yes, Ellie can't get infected, but kind of what I talked about last week's episode when she's running through the train car in Still the Terror. She can still be torn apart and killed by these things, just not bitten, infected. I get it. I respect it. However, Ellie just basically willing herself to get bitten and being basically a feeding tray for the infected. I get when you're immune, maybe you sacrifice that out, but I feel like she's very willing to do that. Like there's this scene once the stalkers just kind of swarm her, that she's just got about 4 on her, and she had to be getting bit. She said she wasn't, but Jesse comes in. He comes to the rescue, and kind of pissed, firing their guns, obviously, so they attract the wolves, and they run into the park. Now, Jesse showing up in Seattle, this is a big change from the games, because while Jesse does show up in Seattle, and in the show, he says that they asked if he came alone. He said no. Him and Tommy came the next night after they figured out that Dina and Ellie went out and were basically just, they were going to die, so they snuck out the next night to go after them. And when they got to Seattle, they split up. Jesse found the theater, found their map, and that's how he found them. In the game, Jesse and Tommy are in Seattle. Yes. But the big difference is Tommy is the very first one to head to Seattle. And so he's the one that sneaks out. And then the next day, because he's just beaten up about it and he wants to go get revenge for Joel. And so he sneaks out the first night. Maria locks things down and then ends up letting Ellie and Dina go out the next day, kind of after Tommy, because Tommy's out there by himself. And then Ellie hears on the Wolves radio that there's a man, a trespasser in this town. I'm blanking on the name of the town right now. I want to say Lakeside, but I don't think that's it. And she goes there thinking it's Tommy. She's trying to find Tommy, and it's Jesse. And so a bit of a switch up there, that Jesse and Tommy go after Dina and Ellie, which kind of had when Tommy's talking to Gail. He's like, I'm worried she's going to do something stupid. But Tommy's more at peace. He's not as driven by revenge in the show. So it'll be interesting to see how some of the later portions of the game, if those get translated here as well. I'm not going to spoil any of that. But we also had, I did a rewatch of season 1 before this. In the games, Tommy going out ahead of them and them finding the aftermath of like the wolves that he's tortured to try to find information, is when we're introduced to the method they would do of where they have 2 people tied up. They have one person point on the map where the location is, and if the second one doesn't say the same spot, then they get killed, tortured. We saw that firsthand in, I think it was the penultimate or episode 8, or no, there are only 8 episodes, episode 6, when Ellie's with David and Joel's trying to find out where they're holding her in season 1, that Joel's doing that method. So we got to see that play out in season 1 of the show. So Ellie already knows that fun little torture method. But I don't know. Big departure how Jesse and Tommy come to be in Seattle. Different medium, telling a slightly different story. One other thing that we get here that I wanted to call out is we get more Dina's backstory and just more reason for why Dina's motivated to be there with Ellie, besides just being, as she says this, in love with Ellie. That she snuck out because her mom was a little more restrictive, didn't want them going out. Dina snuck out. While she was snuck out, her mom and sister were killed by a raider. And Dina came back, saw the raider, shot him, and that was the first person she killed. Now, and she says, if I would have been forced to watch him brutally beat them to death, then would have mattered if they did something to that person's family first? No. I would have hunted him down. There's nothing, Joel didn't deserve what he got. I would have hunted him down till the end. And so that's part of the other reason that she's motivated and help Ellie, because she can put herself in those shoes. And she cared about Joel. So I think I like that we're getting more of Dina's backstory in this. As weird as it sounds, though, we're getting a lot more motivation and emotional beats, I feel like, off of Dina than we are in Ellie. So Dina's feeling more like the capable, strong, smart protagonist than Ellie has these last few episodes. But Ellie is doing the sacrificial thing with her being able to be infected. So Jesse, Ellie, and Dina make their way into the park. This is where we get to see the Seraphites a little bit more, or the Scars. They've got WLF soldier disemboweling him to feel her love. I'm jumping all around the place. I apologize. That episode title was Feel Her Love. It wasn't called, I thought it was an interesting choice for the title because, yeah, we were a little more introduced to the Scars' brutality in this, seeing it firsthand, where they had been more sympathetic initially when they were introduced. But they have the mural of their prophet, and it says Feel Her Love, and underneath that was spray painted Feel This Bitch, and then a whole bunch of just dead Scars or Seraphite bodies, including children, piled underneath it. That causes Dina to almost puke again, Ellie just being sick to see that side of what people are doing and to each other there in Seattle, and just the brutality. And then we get to see it firsthand with the Scars with WLF soldier, who is wanting to they're not torturing him for information, they're just saying no, he's corrupted, so everything he says is a lie, and then have their scythe and disembowel him, and then start chasing. Dina gets shot in the leg. Ellie tells Jesse to take her and run to the theater, and Ellie's going to run off. Ellie's chased by the Scars. They think she's a wolf, but she ends up getting close to the borders of the park. All the Scars turn back around. Ellie sees the hospital and then goes and confronts Nora. That was the end goal. Nora, they knew that's where she was at, trying to get to the hospital so that they can get revenge and try to figure out where Ellie is. Because Nora's the one that, not Ellie, Abby is. Nora's the one that held Ellie down and kind of forced her to watch Joel getting tortured and murdered. And so Ellie confronts Nora. You think Nora's going to be a little bit apologetic. Nope, not even a little bit. And she's more like, that little bitch got what he deserved. So first she's like, yeah, I get it. Sorry you saw it happen. Sometimes at night she still hears his screams, and you think she's going to be like, oh, and I'm haunted by it. But she's like, no. Yeah. She's like, yeah, that little bitch got what he deserved. And attacks Ellie and goes running. And this is very similar to the game, right? Ellie has to chase down Nora. Nora gets to the end of a blocked-in hallway, decides to jump down the elevator shaft, taking her to the basement of the hospital, level B2, where we heard about the spores in the air, the cordyceps in the air. And Ellie sees these bodies attached to the wall through the cordyceps, which we saw some of that in season 1, right? But it was not underground. They were not. I almost get the feeling of like a damp, musty basement, right? There's must, there's mildew, there's moisture, humidity in the air, and that's when these spores exist. Before we see people just cordycept into the wall, infected into the wall, grown into the wall, whatever you want to call it. It's like in the buildings in Boston. In the second episode of season 1, we see that some. But here, it just looks, for lack of a better word, everything just looks wet. It looks damp. And one thing I don't think we're going to see it in the show is there was a nod to when Elise Park was talking about clearing the basement. She said, B1, the first level, we searched it. There was nothing there, not even the rats. And then she talks about B2 is where the spores and the infected were. In the game, in the basement of the hospital, you encounter this super infected that is labeled the Rat King. And it is basically a whole bunch of infected that have merged and grown onto each other. So it's this one big, massive infected. And as you attack them, infected will like peel away and go off and then come fight you too. Some stalkers, some shambler. No, shamblers are big ones. I don't know. Some just standard infected that you're fighting them. I don't think we're going to get that massive character in this because Ellie doesn't have the arsenal to fight a super infected down there in the basement. She is not very well armed. Like in the game at that point, you got like a flamethrower and a shotgun, all this stuff that you've scrounged and hoarded in order to fight this super infected. But I thought that was a nice little nod and Easter egg to it that we got there. And then Nora calls Ellie a stupid bitch, says like, hey, there's spores here. Now we're both infected. And Ellie's just like, am I? She's talking and breathing. And Nora comes to the realization that Ellie is the immune one that they'd heard about and that she does exist. It just kind of goes on with her. Just like, you know what Joel did? Do you know he killed everyone in the hospital? He killed the one person that can make a cure from you that could have helped thousands. He killed him, and that was Abby's father. Don't you care? And this is the first time we get in the show, Ellie acknowledges and says, I know. And she doesn't care. And so before we're kind of like, we know things are tense with Joel and Ellie, you can make some assumptions. In the show, it has never been clear that Ellie has known what Joel did in Salt Lake City at the hospital at the end of season 1. Now, Ellie reveals that she knows what Joel did. She knows his actions, and she doesn't care. She still's going to take revenge. She still doesn't see Abby and that group's mission as justified. She takes a pipe and starts brutally beating Nora to find out where Abby is, yelling at her, where is she? We get a cut to black. And then we get Ellie waking up, sun on her face, and Joel coming in the door saying, hey, kiddo, to close out the episode. So we get the return of Pedro Pascal. We get a flashback. And the preview for next week looks like it is going to be an entire Joel and Ellie flashback episode, including the famous museum scene from the second game and a flashback. So next week's the penultimate episode, directed by Neil Druckmann, written by Neil Druckmann, who wrote the game, directed the game. It is one of the ones that people who saw the show before, it was what most critics had been calling the best episode of the series. It sounds like it's a slower episode, so we will see. I do appreciate the slow, more intimate episodes as well, giving a chance to let the characters breathe a bit. And I'm excited for it. It has a lot of hype going into this episode. I can't believe it's the penultimate episode already. A few things I'll talk about in spoilers here at the end, but I thought this was a solid episode. I don't think it was quite as good as last week's episode, which last week's episode I had said after the second one was probably my favorite of the season, one of the best. As I sat on it a little bit more, the whole Ellie and Dina, how everything played out at the end, I didn't love. And that's the other thing where it's a different version of Ellie. And I called out in last week's review that her reaction to Dina being pregnant was very different as well. And a lot more mature than this version of Ellie acts like, if that makes sense. It kind of seems a little contradicting where said she seems more whimsical and immature. But the pregnancy thing, she's handling with a lot more maturity and kind of resolve and measuredness and excitement, where it's frustration, worry, doubt, jealousy in the game. So, okay, that's going to do it for the talk of this episode. Now I'm going to get into some spoilers from the future of the game. And I don't have a ton that are from segments of this episode at all, except the one thing I'm going to call out is I have no idea how they're going to play this out in the show with only having one more season. So we're set up right now that my prediction, we're going to have the flashback episode next week, and then the finale will be Seattle Day 3, which would be, if it follows the path of the game, let's try to take out my laptop, if it follows the path of the game, again, this is spoilers, future of the game, future of the show, if you have not played the game, stop listening now. Would have the finale episode being Ellie going to the aquarium to try to find Abby, coming across Mel and Owen, killing Mel and Owen, going back to the theater, and the episode would maybe end with Abby showing up and shooting at Ellie. That gives us a whole hell of a lot to do in the finale episode, because we're going to have Ellie reunite with Dina, Jesse, Tommy, that traveling, those confrontations, those reveals. And then it also, that leaves season 3 to be almost entirely told from Abby's perspective. People who are watching the show do not care enough about Abby. I feel the viewership will take a big hit. Supposedly, I haven't reviewed the numbers. The show's taken a hit since Pedro Pascal died in general on here. I think if you have season 3 premiere and it's focusing on Abby with very little Ellie, you're going to lose some people, because that's how the game plays, right? You play the first half as Ellie, and then after Seattle Day 3, then it's Abby, Seattle Day 1. Like Abby flashback, then the Abby, Seattle Day 1. You don't really have a choice but to play forward if you want to see what happens and where the story goes. Which, yeah, people, if you want to see what happens and where the story goes, yeah, that applies to the show as well. But I don't know. Abby is not someone you sympathize with as much. Like, yeah, her dad died, but the last thing we've seen of her now is her brutally murdering Joel. So if it's like, hey, guess what? All of next season, that's who we're focusing on. Come along for the ride. And also, supposedly, the reports they're not going to start filming the next season until 2026. What are we doing? Let's not do another 2+ year delay between seasons. Let's get after it. I said it was going to be difficult on how they were going to tell these stories and keep you invested without it feeling like it's jumping back and forth, and you know where people are, because I get it. You can't have Day 1 Seattle going back and forth between Abby's experience and Ellie's, because yeah, it does make Abby a little bit more sympathetic, and then you know where she is, you know what's going on, so it takes away the mystery of what Ellie and Dina are trying to track down. But I don't know. Like I said, I'm trying to trust the showrunners, but some of the choices, as someone who enjoyed the story of the game, The Last of Us Part 2 was the story. It is heavy, but one of my favorite stories that I've played through, just because of the twist and where it takes you. And I appreciated what they explored through there and the risks that they took. A lot of people didn't, and a lot of people have very justified reasons to not appreciate it. But I don't know. End of the spoilers now, so we'll go to close it out. But I enjoyed this episode. I look forward to seeing next week's episode, the penultimate one. Like I said, lots of acclaim from the critics who reviewed it. And so we'll see. I can't believe we only have 2 episodes left this season. There is a lot to get to, and I don't want to wait till, like I said, they said filming might not start till 2026 on season 3. So we'll see. Could be another hefty wait for season 3 of the show. But let us know in the comments what you thought of this week's episode. What kind of Easter eggs did I miss? What are some complaints you have? But try not to spoil future things in the comments. Don't be dicks. If you want to have conversations about future spoilers, I'm all about that. Go to our Instagram at DownOnceMorePod. DM me. Let's have some lively, spirited discussion on it. But coming up next on the pod, if you've made it through and you've been wondering what the fuck is going on with this voice, allergies are trying to murder me. I have gone through 2 full boxes of Kleenexes and then some in the past week. Not an exaggeration. That's legit, because I have not been able to breathe for a week and a half and have just been mouth breathing like a motherfucker. But this coming Wednesday's normal pod episode will be Brad joined, and we did a villain songs draft. So had a lot of fun with that. And then the plan is going to be at the end of the month, we will be reviewing Next to Normal. The pro shot of the West End revival aired on PBS Great Performances and is available to stream on the PBS app in the US until June 30th. Finding it overseas seems like maybe it's a little bit harder, unfortunately, but it's where slime tutorials come in handy, everyone. So head to YouTube for that. But we'll be talking about that at the end of the month. So stay tuned. And I'll be seeing Hamilton this next Friday as well. So I'll probably talk a little bit about that in 2 weeks episode. But we'll see you next Sunday. Same time, same place, roughly. I'm 0 for 5 for starting episodes and watching them as they air. But tonight, it's Mother's Day. I was on the phone with my mom. So I have an excuse. I couldn't say, hey, Mom, shut up. I'm leaving. I'm hanging up now because The Last of Us is starting. That's rude. So if you liked it, throw a like on the video, comment, share it, follow, subscribe. Love to see the subscribers grow. Thank you all. See you next time. And don't forget to go down once more. Later.